welcome back to the next video. Okay, so previous video, what we did is we made us this blacksmith's knife, or a Viking knife, depending on what you want to call it. So here it is. I got a previous video that is all just making this. So go check that one out. But what we're going to do now is we're going to make a sheath for it. This is our finished knife. Everything's done on there. Now it's time to make custom leather sheath. So that is our next step. I'm going to work the best I can with the camera angles, as it's kind of awkward with the bench and the way the camera's set up on the tripod, but here we go. So got me a piece of paper, got my knife, got me a cutting utensil with a new blade. So here's what we're going to do. We want this one to carry, I like them to carry the spine towards your pocket. That's what they are. These are utility knives, basically replacing your basic folding knife with something a little more durable, a little more reliable, a little nicer to look at. So what we're going to do is, this is going to be our outside edge. So I got me a piece of basic printer paper and a pen. We're going to hold this thing down, try to keep it straight, although it's not a huge deal, and we're going to trace it. Try to hold it in place. Okay, so there's our, sorry for the camera bump, there's our traced shape. So that's going to be the start of our template. So now we need to give some room for the sheath. So on the spine here, we know we want it to go up, we're going to round out somewhere in here. So it won't be too tall, but I want it to work up in this area. So I tend to freehand it. You want to look for somewhere in the neighborhood of 1/4 of an inch. The same thing over here. Give it some space. That's going to be our fold, because we're going to do a folding style sheath. So, and then this is going to be the rest of the sheath and the welt. It's okay to leave the welt somewhat larger. You want to have room to punch the holes for your stitching. So here is our basic knife shape. This will be our basic sheath shape. So at the top here, I know this is going to be near the edge. I'm going to come up, and I kind of like a little bit of a finger hole in my sheaths that are like this, and tall on the back side. Something in the neighborhood of that. I like to freehand them. All my knives are one-off knives. You know, I never make anything exactly the same. I mean, if you ordered something that's exactly the same, I can certainly make it, but I like stuff to be, you know, in the equivalent of only one in the world. So this is going to be a basic knife shape. So with that in mind, this is the back side where we're going to do our fold over. Now, with our nice sharp knife, we're going to cut everything out but the back end. You want to keep it as straight to the line as you possibly can. Any waviness or grooviness is going to mess with the way it transfers. And we'll go a little farther because of that tip. And then we got to do our top area here. All right, let's see what we got. So there is our cutout. It's a very simple way of making a knife sheath. Kind of leave that straight up to that edge. It can always be cleaned up later. Because now what we're going to do to figure out our dimensions, which we need to go a little farther. Now we're going to fold this thing over. And we're going to try to fold it over on our previous line. A little tear there, but that's alright. Alright, so there's our folded somewhat on the center line. So now what I do is I come across the rest of it and I trace that print around the other side of the folded page. Sorry if my hands are in the way. It's an awkward space to work in. Sorry about the laundry sounds. I'm doing laundry. Gotta multitask. Okay, so there's the other half. So we got our main side of our knife, and then the other half of what will be the sheath. So now we cut that out. As clean and straight as possible. There it is. Alright. So this is going to be our basic shape that we're going to put on our roll of leather. So, next step, so the way the knife's going to sit in here is like this. This will be our, basically our sheath. So now it's time to transfer it to the leather. So here we have our pattern that we cut out. Everything's marked out. That's going to be our welt. So now it's time to move it to our leather. So this is just a piece of veg tan. I believe I got it from Tandy Leather. Not the biggest piece ever, but I've made a lot of sheaths out of this. So I want to lay it out in a way that we lose as little as possible. This is where it starts to get mildly awkward. So now, in a regular pen isn't the best, but these cut lines are going to get removed anyway, or marking lines. So now, trace around your pattern you made. This can be a little awkward with paper. Some folks like to use like a plastic. But for a sheath like this, that's pretty basic. The paper will do just fine. All the way around. Okay. There we go. There's our imprint on our piece of leather there. This is where a fresh knife comes in handy. You can get, you know, all kind of different knives for leather. This is what I got. It's just a basic razor blade. It's because the blades are cheap. So now, cut it out. And you want to stay as close to those lines as you possibly can, because it's going to help you later on. especially in the finished project, if you can keep with your line, your two halves meet up much cleaner, especially with the welt when you cut it out. And you're way less likely to have unevenness in the finish. Didn't go through the first time, not that I expected it to, but there we go. There's the first section cut out. At this point, what I'll probably do is I'll follow this next line just clean across. There we go. Set this aside. There's our start piece, but we got to clean up the rest of that. Okay. Much better run like a pencil. Get a cleaner cut. There we go. Scrap. Now this other side. I'm going to start a little further in because it's hard to start on a sharp corner. There. A little bit. There we go. This is just a basic cutting board. Works just fine. There's fancy pants mats and things that you can get, but I don't do enough of these things for it to be such a big deal. But we still got that one sharp side corner. Both corners are looking kind of sharp. So I'll show you one of the other cutting tools you can use. Okay, so this just came in a kit. It's decently sharp, just a flat blade knife. It's got a good edge on it. So now we'll clean up our corners using this. And you can do it rocket. And you can do little cuts to match your edge when you have round edges. And the side the bevel's on matters. So if you put the bevel out, you get a sharper cut on your edge of whatever you're cutting. And there's our rounded edges. So this is what's going to become our sheath. Still needs a little bit of cleanup here and there. And these edges will get sanded down and shaped up. And that is going to be our sheath. So, on to the next step. So here's our basic shape. We still got some pen lines on there. Can't really see them on the camera, but they're there. So I take a piece of lighter sandpaper, about a 120 or so. And now, because our edges are a little rough, because I'm not the best at cutting things out, I'll put a little sanding down. It's better to sand in one direction. I admittedly forget, and it's not the end of the world if you do. But now it's just about making sure the edges are smooth and round. Not smooth as in finished product smooth, but make sure you don't have any jagged spots where the razor blade missed. Make sure your corners are nice and clean. And I go around the whole thing and just sand it up. Nothing special about that. So once I got it sanded, we'll come back. Shape is looking good. Now, after all that sanding, everything should be cleaned up and smooth on our edges. So next thing I like to do, wet cloth, get this front side nice and wet, because we're going to put some texture in it. And I don't got, you know, a whole heap of fancy stamps or any of that business. So we're going to get mildly creative to make a texture so this thing stands out a little bit. So nice and wet. Oop. Looks nice and even. Now it's going to go in this here plastic bag. Stuff that in there. Get all the air out. And then I'll show you what we're going to do. Give this thing a little bit of flavor. And that flavor is going to involve this here rubber mallet. So head on to the next step. Lighting is extremely bad because it's nighttime. It's just the sidewalk out front. So now put some texture in this thing. And you'd be surprised how hard you need to whack it to really get some texture in there. And then it's got some good texture. Let's put something lighter in there. So we're going to come over here to the brick setup over here and put some of that in there too. Let's go with this one. Okay. Ouch, right in the finger. Don't do that. Ouch, again. How dumb you gotta be to do it twice. Okay, good enough. I don't think any more of my fingers can handle it. Here's our now textured piece of leather. Just a very basic texture. Stamps are always nice, but I feel like this for essentially a free texture comes out pretty good. You can almost see it on the camera there. It's basic, but it's got a nice like random pattern to it. So next step, we're going to let this dry, because now we're going to move on to making our stitching groove and start punching some holes for this thing. This thing here is still a little wet, needs to sit and dry out so it's not so malleable, flexible. Hang on, son, I got you. There you go, go on. Sorry, boy was in here. Alright, so needs to dry out a little bit. You can see that water level. So now, while we're waiting for that to dry, it's time to cut out the welt. So with the welts, I like to kind of leave a little bit of curve in the back end. It's going to be the back side where the handle starts to form. Kind of like to curve that out so it kind of guides the knife into the sheath when I'm done. So I'm going to follow that as close as possible. I'm going to go to what would be my center fold, essentially. So my center fold comes down here. If I need to take stuff off, I can take stuff off. Sorry if my hand's in the way. Alright. There we have a section. Now, the back end here. So this is what will become our welt, although that far end is a little wonky. It can still be worked with. Here's our piece. There's our welt. So, time to trace it on the leather and get it cut out. I've got a section of leather here that's different from the original. It's not the same thickness. It's slightly thinner, a little heavier. It's more compact, I guess you could say. Makes for a good welt. Got this scrap here. So now we're going to take and we're going to trace our welt in. This part can be a little tricky if you got a thin piece of paper. You're going to line it up. Ooh, it's going to be shifty. Try to follow your line as exact as possible. Shoot dang, just like that. There it is. I'm going to follow that outside line because that paper can get a little tricky. I'd rather have a larger welt than a smaller one. But if you can get it as perfect as possible, it's going to help you in the long run because it's hard to even everything out on your sewn edges if your welt's a little big. So there's ways to do it, but it's easier, just like blacksmithing. The more work you do on the anvil, the less grinding you have to do in the end run. The closer you get your leather now, the less sanding you got to do in the end. So take this guy and we're going to cut it out. most of our welt. Alright, so for this little bit that's awkward, I'm going to use this guy. A little cleaner. Little cuts following your line with something a straight edge like this will get you pretty far, especially if you're following a curve. Okay. That. It's a decent looking welt. So I'll go back, sand these edges a little bit just to clean up, and we'll come back once I've done that. We've got our basic shape for the sheath. Got the welt in here. Matches up with the knife nicely. And the edges. I'll probably have to trim this edge off a little bit. But next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our stitching groove into one side of this. Now, I like these knives to be pocket carry. Basically replaces your basic folding knife. Something with a little more flavor. Most folks are right-handed. I'm right-handed. Goes in your right side pocket. And then I put a clip on there. I tend to carry mine on the left side because I keep my phone in the right. But most folks carry right, so that's the way we're going to do it. So now we're going to put the stitching groove in this main piece so that it's on the nice side. So we're going to do it. This is the side, if it's a right carry sheath, this is the side that the clip's going to go on. This is the side I'm going to do my stitching groove on, the other side. But now that I think about it, first thing we're going to do, we're going to glue this welt in so that I know and can fold this thing over so that I don't make my groove too long. So next we'll glue it. For glue, we're going to use contact cement. This is just DAP that I got from Ace Hardware. Works just fine. Some folks like Barges. Barges is good. This is just what was easiest to obtain for me. And I got me, nice, dipped my pocket right in there. Oh well. So, got a paintbrush. What we're going to do is we're going to rough this up with the sandpaper on the smooth side of the welt to help the contact cement stick better. And then we'll get it glued up. Here's our welt. We're going to rough this up a bit. Doesn't take a whole lot. Alright, so that's roughed up. We got our contact cement. Then take our original pattern. We're going to overlay it. As close as possible, which is not always easy. Okay. And trace that welt line. So that is essentially where we want our welt line. Which, if we take our piece, we match it up, looks pretty good. So now, time to do the glue. Outline of our welt, our roughed up welt. Here's our glue. Little paintbrush action. So we're going to glue it up. Now stick to the edge and then spread it outwards like so. That way you don't get glue too far on the inside. Nobody wants glue on their knife that they just paid you money for. Oop, that's a lot. There we go. Follow your line. Right about yonder. Alright, this is the side that's down. So now we follow the line on the welt. Be slightly messy. So, alright. Oh, way to go. Nice. There we go. Saved it. So this needs to sit for anywhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 minutes. So I usually set a timer for 10 because I'm not always the quickest at getting right back to it. So we come back when it's time to stick. It's been about 10-15 minutes. Now we take our contact cement welt and we line it up. With the mark. Now I like to take a hammer and just lightly lay it in. Now we got a welt. A welt that matches the knife. So when this folds over, it's going to fold nice and clean. So let that sit and dry. Time for the next step. This is a stitching groover. It can be used for many things other than stitching grooving. You can use it to put you know, some added design into something if you want to. The sheath. So if this is our welt, we want to be about halfway, close to halfway. I don't know if you can see that, but it's real close to halfway on that welt. I don't want it too far in or out, or we'll miss when we stitch. So this thing's pretty well set as it is, about 1/8. So the way these knives are done, this is our outside. I like the spine to sit towards your pocket, right up against your pocket. It makes it like it's not even there. So this is going to be the extra pretty side right here, because the clip's going to go over here, the pocket clip. That's going to be the outside side. So this is the side with the welt that is going to go up against the pocket. Here's my regular everyday one that's pretty well beat, but I carry this on the left. So we're going to now run a stitching groove down this side, but by gluing the welt on first, we know where our stitching needs to end. End of the welt, end of the welt. So I want my groove to follow that space. So with that, we get it centered in there, and we just pull that guy around, keeping very careful and centered. Sometimes you pull fast like that, it comes out clean, but this is going to be our stitching groove. You can run it twice if you want. I think it wouldn't hurt on this one to run another one. Lightly though, because if you're even outside a little bit, it's going to show. So me personally, if I'm going to make a second pass, I'm going to do it very lightly. And that is going to be our stitching groove. So now we got our groove, it's time to start punching some holes. Okay. Here we have our piece with our stitching groove in it. Kind of hard to see, but it's there. It's textured, everything's ready to go. So ignore the dog. I like to glue the welt in first because, you know, when you're punching holes in this, you can lay it nice and flat on your welt, and you get through 2 layers that way. If a lot of guys will do the single layer and then fold it and do the second and third layers through that single layer guide, but I have found that with these folded style taco knives, it doesn't come out as straight on that back end as I would like. It's not as clean. So I found if I do the double layer first, it comes out, you know, cleaner on the back side. So that's just me. You can do it however you want. Some guys, you know, put starter holes in it, glue it all together, take it to a drill press and run a drill bit through it. You could do that too. Since these are going to be seen on both sides, I just like to have, you know, a nice clean line as best I can. So with that, we've got a scrap piece, random shaped chunk of leather here, and I'm going to lay this against it, and then we're getting into our punches. These are just Amazon orders. I mean, they're not anything super high tech. It's a 4mm, different sizes. I've even managed to bend one of the teeth on one of these things. Oh well, you know, they weren't very expensive. They get me through the sheaths that I make, and when it gets too bent and can't be fixed or something like that, I'll just get a new set. You can certainly buy nicer ones. You can also, with your stitching, because it's much easier to run a single punch than a multi-punch. Obviously, it's less material to go through. It's easier to remove from the leather. But if you want to do that, this came in a kit that I ordered that I got some of this stuff in. This is a stitching marker. I mean, it's still in the bag, so you can see I've never really used it. It comes with little wheels, but I prefer just to go to the route of knock it out with the punches because I've got them. So I get it on here. Now, this is kind of a curved line. Now we're getting into curves down here, so I kind of start in a straight space. So I know I want my first stitches to be up here, so I'll kind of just do a little press and walk myself down using, you can use the 2-1. So I want it to end right on the welt right here. That makes an indent, that makes an indent, that makes an indent. And then we get around the little curve, and now we're going to start right here on our straight. So, mallet, whack it through, goes through the 2 halves. Now you got to pry the thing out of there. Sometimes that's hard. I have found, which I'm sure leather workers will disagree, but I can use this as a wedge to kind of pull my stitcher out. And now I can walk it back, keeping in my line down the groove. I'm sure this leaves a mark, but it's not anything I've ever noticed. I guess if you're doing real high dollar, like crazy complex stuff with lots of punch work and shading and all that business, that might not be the way to go. But it works for me. It's just a basic simple sheath with a basic texture. And this gets us set up for our hand stitching. So this part is not anything magically fantastic. It's like watching grinding when somebody's making a knife. Grinding isn't anything that interesting. It's just sparks. So, ouch. Nice. Don't stab yourself. So I'm going to run all these marks, and then we'll come back once it's done. It just goes around. You know, I can use the longer one as I get going here to kind of cover some space, and then shorter ones to make those curves around to the very end. So we'll come back once I have that done. Back now, we've got all our holes punched in there. They go all the way around to the end, right where they follow our welt. So one thing I like to do is that kit I got came with an awl. This is just a basic Amazon kit, not anything crazy, although I don't expect it to last terribly long. Not that they're not made well, it's just stuff like this can take a lot of abuse, and if you're just buying it from some random Chinese company or something, you know, it gets beat up. So you can buy much nicer gear, Tandy Leather, there's lots of other places, but this works for me for what I do, which is pretty, you know, somewhat basic knife making, sheaths, that is, sheath making, I should say. But this works plenty good for me. So something I like to do is take the awl, which is basically just a ice pick short version, and I'll go back through all the holes I just punched. And don't stab yourself, I've done that. And I'll kind of open them up. And what that's going to do is that is going to give you extra room so that when you stitch, you're not fighting the needle through. And also, it's going to make it much easier to punch your backside holes when the time comes that you're ready to put it all together. And that way your punches are going to glide right through there, and you're really only going to be punching one layer, which is going to make it way cleaner, way simpler, smoother, and it's going to save you a headache. So I'll do this actually from both sides It is mildly time consuming to sit here and do every one of these, especially when you're not doing a fold over sheath. You're doing a two-sided sheath for a dagger or something. But the headache it saves later on, in my opinion, is worth it. So don't be afraid to spend a little extra time to make your life easier. Smarter, not harder, as they say. That one's being finicky. Yeah, don't stab yourself. I have done that. There is a sheath out there somewhere in existence that has my blood on it. I think it actually ended up going to my mother-in-law. She runs a farm, so somebody who could always use a good knife. But yeah, I stabbed myself, and before I knew it, it's like, oh no, I bled on that thing. I didn't even realize I'd done it. These things are sharp. So it's worth the time to sit here and go through both sides and make sure your holes are nice and open. And you may have to do this more than once. It gets easier each time, but if you got to do it more than once, do it more than once, you know. And you'll understand, you know. Before I started doing this, I'd punch the holes, everything was good, and then I'd fight the needle through. And I got tired of that, because then you got to grab your needle with a pair of pliers. You run the risk of bending it. Yes, needles are cheap, but at the same time, why ruin tools, you know? So that's one side. I'm going to go back and do the other side, and we'll be on our next step. Here we have all our openings poked and kind of opened up, wall it out. You might have to do this a couple times, save you the headache. But next step is I want to lay out my pocket clip. So here's my pocket clip. I actually make these. They are hand forged. I do sell them. Check out my Etsy shop. It's Lone Pine Metalworking. I don't have a listing right now, but you can message and order. I've also got an email, lonepineengraving@gmail, in case you want to order some of these. I sell these for leatherwork of all kinds. You can't really see the thing, can you? So these are, I make myself. And they come with hardware. Come with a set of hardware so you can attach them to whatever you want to. And so we're going to lay out where we want that. So we know this is going to be the outside as far as the pocket's concerned, which means if the spine goes to the right of your pocket on the right hand side, then it's going to lay over here. So the way I like to do these is they come punched a hole to secure it with a rivet ended screw type piece of hardware. And then I lay a strap, this is a scrap piece, but I lay a strap across that holds that top half in place. So when I do these, what I'll do is I'll set my knife in so it matches and kind of close it as best I can. So the knife is going to sit this way. This is going to be our pocket clip side. So now I kind of try to match up a little higher up on the sheath as far as where the clip ends up, because it tends to hold better in your pocket, it sits cleaner, it doesn't wiggle around, things like that. And you can get real technical if you want, but I basically just eyeball it. But we also know our stitching follows our welt. That's where the stitching ends. So we don't want to be way high of that welt. So that's about edge of my welt. So once I have that, I eyeball it as far as straight. Then you got to kind of pinch it. And then I will mark with a pencil. There's other things you can use. A red gel pen is really good because a lot of dyes are based in red. I don't have one handy. So try to get it as straight as possible, eyeballed. And then I'll make a line, very light, on there so I know where the edge of the clip is, and then I mark my rivet hole on there. So now we have an idea of the spacing we need to work with. So this is the top of the clip. Here is the rivet hole down there. So what I'll do now is I'll punch this rivet hole. I don't have a leather punch. Got our hole punched, got my rivet in. Now I've got my line very light. You can't see it on camera really, that's how light it is, but that tells me where the edge of what I eyeballed as center is, and it looks pretty good. Now I need a strap that goes across. Now I've got this curved piece, and I know I've got this curved section that piece is going to need to fit on, so I need to account for this stitching curve so that my strap that holds this clip in place is clean on the edge of my leather here. So I'm going to leave that like that. I'm going to line it up to my eyeballed mark. It doesn't need to be that complicated. I just happen to have this random weird piece hanging off of my leather roll here. So I'm just going to straighten it out wide. And I know that's longer than I need, so I'm just going to cut it off straight. And it's going to be plenty wide on this end. It'll need to be straightened out. But that is essentially going to be my strap. Now what I want is something straight. It doesn't need to be anything crazy fancy. I would like to have a square edge at this point, but I don't have one handy. It's out in the shop, and I don't want to walk the 20 yards out there to get it. I should have thought of that beforehand. But let's go ahead and mark. And we're just going to do it using the edge of my punch there. And we're going to straighten out this piece. There. Pretty straight. So this piece is going to go, here's my mark, here's my piece across. See that? So now I want to make sure it is straight and has room for a stitching groove, which we know our stitching groove is yay wide. So what I will then do is get it straight, eyeball it straight, make sure my clip is straight. Oh, don't mess it up. It's not the simplest task all the time. Hold that down, this over, and now we're gonna, oh, if it doesn't move, that part can be frustrating. Let's do it this way. It'll be easier. So hold that down, get this over in the neighborhood of what I'm looking for. And then I'm going to hold it and sneak in here and make myself another line so I know where this piece of material is going to line up. Now that tells me where it needs to be so that I can mark where my stitching needs to be. So again, very light line, not anything crazy good, fancy. That gives me a basic mark that I can eyeball what is straight. From here, I'm going to clean this up and flatten it out, and then I'm going to match the curve that this particular sheath, some of my sheaths don't have. I decided to put a little extra flare on this one. Some of them don't have that extra flare, but since that's where my strap is going to line up, I want to match it. So now I'm going to, straighten this thing out. And since it's long, once it's straightened out, I can get it in position and flip this and mark on the back side so I follow my curve so that when the time comes to lay the holes through and the stitching, it all comes up nice and clean. So I'm going to straighten this out and we'll come back. This is that piece now. Cut it out, straightened it out, and did a little sanding on the edges to clean it up a little bit. So now we're going to put the same texture in that to match the sheath. You already saw me do the sheath, so I'm just going to go do the same thing. We got some texture in there now, so it matches the rest of it. And then what I did is I lined this up where I wanted it, and on the back side here I marked it where it needs to come off to follow the edge of the sheath. So now we'll just cut that off of there. And that we're going to leave straight because it's following that curve, but over here I want to round these edges out. Took a little sandpaper to the edges. You can see that it's rounded. So next, got this guy set. So let's make our stitching mark. Oh, a little bit off. That one slipped. I guess we're going to go across the whole thing. There's going to be thread across that anyway, so it won't be noticeable. Usually I try to keep it within the edges, but if you slip, it's okay. Thread's going to go all the way across that because we're going to stitch from the edge to make sure it's secure. So we'll go make sure we're marked up. We fit over here. Might have to trim some off. Nope, that'll be good. So we'll come back. We got to do the staining now. So now it's time to stain this, and what I've got is this EcoFlow kind of, what's it called? Leather dye, timber brown. Comes out with a nice color. So, and then I just use a paper towel. There's better things than this because you definitely lose stain this way. But it's what I've got at the moment, and I need to get this done. So I gotta pop out my rivet here. And I just kind of go light. There we go. So also, we're going to want to do the inside most of the way from the well up. There we go. Now that the stain has dried out, everything's looking good, I put my rivet back in, and then this is all going to match. So next step is we need to prepare these edges here, because when it gets folded and glued to punch the other holes, it's not going to be easy to get to. So the rest of this, the clip and everything, will get attached later. So number 4, start on the back is what I like to do. Went ahead and did the same thing to our piece of strap, minus this back edge because it's got to blend with the other edges, the center that isn't trimmed. Touch of sandpaper wouldn't hurt. Okay, Now we're gonna do these edges, and I use the stain and just get them, just kind of dab it on there. So while this is wet, I'll take my rolling stick here that I made. I just took a dowel, put it in the drill press, and then held different size files to it to get these grooves. They sell these on Amazon though if you really need one. So now I'll just sit here and do this and smooth everything out. This is what I have. There's all kinds of products out there for this, but this is just a piece of beeswax that I got, and I use this for all kinds of stuff. See, that side's there because I did finished some forging in beeswax, things like that, and I like to get that edge and get some beeswax on it. And once it's beeswaxed, I'll go back and do the same thing with the burnishing tool. We are now over here at my extremely messy engraving table. Take our John Guest needle, or John James, thread it through, black thread in this case, bring it up about an inch, center punch that thread, center punch that thread, get down and out, and you do the other side. There we go. And then just to make it slightly easier, thread, this is paraffin wax. I'll do drag across, just straightens it out a little bit from the roll and keeps it nice. So we only got 3 holes, so we want to start in the middle. And we're going to start in the middle. Now this thing is going to attach in my engraving vise here, and I'm going to use it as a sewing pony. So come back. Strap is stitched. It's all attached there. Looking good. Now it's time. We're going to glue the other halves together and get them nice and even, and then it'll be time to punch the next holes. So you already saw me glue, so we'll come back once the glue is done and it's time to do hole punching. This is now glued. We got it all glued up as evenly as possible on those edges. It's a little easier to see. So here's our strap there, which is going to meet up nicely. Nice and clean along that side. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to start with my scrap piece. I'm going to fold this back. Now we're going to start punching the holes to match. Same way as before. We don't want to go straight because this is going to be slightly angled because of the fold over. So you got to go at a mild angle when you do it. We're going to start in that stitch there. This is the second side of the strap. Make sure it's even. And back stitch it. Through wrap, saddle stitch, elbows up and down, There's the first one. Okay, everything's stitched. Saddle stitched all the way up, and I also took it over and I flattened it out a little bit into that stitching groove. Everything's looking nice and clean. So with my strap now, I got to get my pocket clip in there. Little rubber washer to level it in your pocket. And the screw goes in. Okay. Got it tightened down. Pocket clip's looking good. Now we're going to move back over to the cutting board and clean it all up and get it finished. Back over at the cutting board. Once I move some things, now we can clean up the edges on this guy. This is still the number 4. Beveler. Bit of hand sanding later. Not too much. 30 seconds, a minute worth. Now, it's time to even out those edges. This is dried out. Now it's just time to hit it with the rubbing stick. Alright, here it is, nice and shiny. The edge is all cleaned up. It's been waxed. The wax keeps the moisture out. We got our custom forged pocket clip on there. If anybody's interested in one of these, I make them. You can go to Lone Pine Metalworking on Etsy. But there it is. Here's our knife. There it is, and we'll do a finish with one of the other knives on there. Alright, here's 2 of them. 2 out of the 3. There they are, custom sheaths and all. If anybody has any questions, any comments, let me know. Thanks y'all for watching. This is the one we watched the entire video made of. Right here. That's the sheath. This was the previous video, which is what I'm going to say. There is a previous video where I made the knife, so if anybody wants to see that, go back, check it out. It's not a part 1. They're differently labeled, but you can find it. There it is. Like, subscribe, share the video. Till next time, we may do a video on these. I think that might be a video we do, is these pocket clips. But let me know what you think. Also, questions, anything like that, let me know. See you in the next one.